Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the ISO, I'd like to welcome you to today's WEIM Assistance Energy Transfer Extension stakeholder call to discuss some developments with Danny Johnson today. My name is Christina Guimera, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. Next slide, please. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping reminders. This call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. And please keep comments professional and respectful today and try to be brief and refrain from repeating what has already been said so we can manage the time efficiently. Next slide, please. Some reminders for raising your hand. If you're connected to audio through your computer, you can open the participant and chat panels on the bottom right. If you dialed into the meeting, please press *3 to raise your hand. And please remember to state your name and affiliation before making your comment. And if you have any trouble with the raising hand, you can also send your questions via chat to all panelists. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd like to introduce Danny Johnson to get us started.
Thanks, Christina. So my name is Danny Johnson. I'm a member of the market policy team here at the ISO, and getting right to the point, I'm here today to talk about the Assistance Energy Transfer product and a potential extension of the existing product. So AET stands for Assistance Energy Transfers. This was a product that we created in 2022, following a lot of feedback from stakeholders and a lot of our governance members. The general sentiment was, let's see if we can leverage the WEIM to increase reliability. The EIM is an imbalance market, and when it was originally created, there was a test called the RSE, which many of you may be familiar with, that tried to ensure that all parties coming into the market had sufficient supply to meet their capacity and flexibility obligations. If a BA was to fail and not meet that threshold, then its transfers would be locked so that it wasn't able to capacity lean on the broader market footprint. That is a principle that we still adhere to, but we were trying to balance that with kind of the underlying good utility operations, good utility practice, RC, BAA to BAA coordination, wherein and in an emergency situation, system operators are calling each other. They're seeing if there's any latent supply available, any ATC available, to transfer emergency megawatts. And the question that was asked is there a better, more efficient way to do this? And the answer is, yeah, there's a lot better way to do this. It's to use the CAISO's market optimization to wring out every last potential megawatt of emergency supply and deliver it to a balancing authority area who's experiencing reliability issues. So that's what we went ahead and did. This was a somewhat rushed stakeholder process in 2022. The objective was to get something in place prior to the summer of 2023. 2022 was, I think, the third summer in a row where we had pretty hot temperatures. And so the drive was, let's see how quickly we can make AET available to increase system reliability. So we did that realizing that the design wasn't perfect. It is not the most efficient design that we could have come up with. It was a design that everybody agreed upon met the reliability need. So when we made that decision, we placed a sunset date on that design, which is December 31st, 2025. The idea here was to provide a runway for the CAISO to work with stakeholders and see if this design can be refined. And what we have found in this intervening time is that revisiting this design, while worthwhile, hasn't been a priority from stakeholders. It's still something that we're very open to. I think the ISO just put out a survey about what are stakeholder priorities. So we would like to hear back where this ranks within that set of stakeholder priorities. But irregardless of if we look to redesign this product or just keep the existing product, none of that is going to happen before December 31st, 2025. So our idea in coming to you with this very narrow presentation today, and then hopefully set of tariff changes, is to just extend the existing design through the end of this year such that we aren't degrading the reliability of the Western interconnection heading into 2026. And we have some reasons why we think this is reasonable that are supported by data that I'll be walking through later in this presentation, but ultimately this is something that we're seeking your feedback on of if we're reading the situation right. Can we go to the next slide? So we talked about kind of how the RSE fits into the WEIM, but prior to kind of launching into how is the AET product being used and what are we seeing, it's worth talking about how the actual product is designed. So the assistance energy transfer is a voluntary feature of the WEIM. So a BAA has to consciously opt in. It provides an alternative to having transfers locked following the failure of the capacity or the FlexRAM test. And as a trade-off, it assesses an ex post surcharge on some subset of WEIM transfers. Ex post means that this surcharge is not directly applied in the market. It's not considered by the dispatch. Rather, it is a settlements charge that is applied after the fact. The volume of this surcharge is bounded by a couple things. It's bounded by the RSE failure amount or the dynamic WEIM transfers that are eventually tagged. There are some credits that are noted on this slide. I'm happy to take questions on those, but the general principle is no BAA will be assessed more than their RSE failure amount, but if intervening actions are taken within the hour or following that failure that lessen the amount of transfers, the surcharge to the extent possible would not be assessed on those transfers. A simple example helps illustrate this. If a balancing authority area fails by 100 megawatts and their maximum surcharge exposure is based on 100 megawatts, but if manual dispatch occurs, emergency DR is activated, other actions are taken such that only 50 megawatts of dynamic EIM transfers occur, then the surcharge would be based off 50 megawatts of transfers. So I'd like to stop and see if there's any kind of foundational questions about what the existing design is or how it slots into the WEIM. Okay, we can come back to that. Oh, I see a question. Great.
From Bruce.
Me at Bonneville.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Bruce. Yes.
Hey, what mechanism does the market participants know that they've been awarded, some surcharge of megawatts? Because you fail at T40, you're going to get your results, about 23 after. You're going to know how much you failed flex by. So, it's going to be 100 megawatts. You won't know what your dynamic transfers are until the hour's over. So at a minimum, it's going to be, let's say, 100 megawatts. If you did, how would you know that you're going to get picked up by an AET, or is it just like automatic?
It's an automatic surcharge that is applied through settlements once a BA is opted into the master file. So in this example, you'd know your maximum exposure is 100 megawatts, but then depending upon the dynamic tag, you could have less of a surcharge in your settlement statement.
Right. But are you going to see any notice in BAOP? Because I know that was one of the things I was discussing that with a friend of mine at Pacificor, is that like in BAOP, seeing that amount show up with it underneath the dispatchable generation column would be handy to know, just to see that value show up. And then let's say you did, have a manual dispatch, or you increase generation, after you saw that you failed flex, let's say by the amount that you failed, would that then, as you're saying, obviate any type of settlement charges if you increase your generation by that amount that you failed? But
sure. So there's a couple things there. The first would be, from what I understand, a technology enhancement that we can request through existing processes to get this displayed in BAOP. We don't need new kind of tariff or policy around that just to display this information. So we have existing channels for that. Your second question, is more complicated, and this is where the inefficiency of the current design comes in. And there's an example later in this presentation that highlights it. It's not always a one-for-one less surcharge exposure for increased generation. There are market dynamics that are occurring, and by not pricing the surcharge in the market, you can get into situations where maybe you increase generation by 50 megawatts or lower load or whatever a BA is doing, but you still may receive some WEIM transfers due to the economics of your BA's generation versus the broader footprint that might not result in 50 megawatts of reduction on the surcharge.
So even though so you're saying it's still possible to get a surcharge even if you have attempted to increase your generation, in the BA by the amount that you failed by, you could still get charged?
Yes. There's a kind of a simple numeric example that we can walk through in a few slides, and then we have some data on kind of how often is this occurring and what are the dollars involved in this type of surcharge.
Yeah, last question here. Have you guys thought about changing the opt-in, opt-out? I know a couple of us have thought about how kind of onerous it is, kind of getting in, the whole process of getting in and getting out. Is there any thoughts about making it a little easier?
I think from a system standpoint, we can look to make it easier. It was a conscious policy choice to have it not be super dynamic. And the original concern was we want AET to be a backstop reliability function. We did not want balancing authority areas on a hour-by-hour basis trying to figure out if they should maximize and have their transfers locked at some level or have AET exposure. We wanted to take that potential economic decision about what would be the lower cost way to receive emergency energy off the table.
Is the surcharge always $1,000? Is it always going to be $1,000, or would it ever be any other lower price?
So that's a policy question that we're not proposing to change here. We set it at $1,000 with the principle that a BAA should use all of their supply prior to getting AET transfers from the rest of the market. That would be the original reason, but to the extent there's a lot of sentiment within the stakeholder community to have a different number, sure. Like it doesn't have to be $1,000. That was what we all collectively decided 3 years ago.
Yeah, because the only time I would see $1,000 is if you go infeasible and you could see your infeasibility numbers, show up for that first interval the next hour that you're probably concerned about failing, since that's the one you normally do. And, you can always just kind of increase generation to avoid that infeasibility. But, I think $1,000, I don't know what's keeping most people from getting into AET, but, it seems a rather severe price to use.
Danny, this is Heather. And just so everyone knows, I'm senior counsel at the CAISO. I did just want to clarify that we have it actually structured so it's $1,000 unless the hard cap is in effect, and then it's actually $2,000. So I just wanted to note that, subject to what Danny said, of stakeholders can have a decision to change that. And then Danny, I didn't know if you wanted to highlight in your prior answer to Bruce that the balancing authorities that generate extra and provide additional assistance to others receive a share of those funds. I know you and Bruce were talking about the ability to, increase the dynamic transfers, and I think Bruce was focused on getting it to zero. I think there's another way of looking at it, of generating excess and receiving the revenue, and I didn't know if you wanted to highlight that.
It's a good thing to highlight, and I'm thankful that you highlighted it. But yeah, that's a part of the design, is the money flows back from the party who's receiving the assistance to the broader footprint providing it.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your time. That's all I have for now.
Sure. Can we go to the next slide then? So this is a little bit of a monochromatic heat map that is trying to highlight how this product is used. So the darker the color, the more often within a calendar month this product is being used by each of the 10 BAAs using it. And then the numbers in each block are a representation of the total intervals that that the test failed. So you can see that this product is used in a multitude of different ways by different balancing authority areas. There are some balancing authority areas that are opting in pretty infrequently and for really targeted reasons. At the same time, you have other balancing authority areas who are just opting in all the time, and then this product is serving as a reliability backstop for them. Can we go to the next slide? This is a graph since the summer of 2023 about the dollars involved in the AET surcharge on a monthly basis. And this illustrates a couple different things. First, AET is being used roughly when we would have expected it to. It's being used in the summer of 2023 during peak load conditions. There is some usage in the winter of 2024 in January and February. A lot of people on this call might remember that was an extreme cold snap in the Pacific Northwest that the WEIM was able to help successfully transfer megawatts up into the Pacific Northwest, but AET was a part of that. And then there is more use in the summer of 2024. I wouldn't read too much into it being a lot larger of a volume because this product has been adopted by more and more balancing authorities over the course of its existence. So we have larger AET surcharges in 2024 summer than 2023, but that might be just because we have more parties utilizing the product rather than kind of highlighting any underlying market dynamics or use strategies. And can we go to the next slide? This highlights that last point. These are bar graphs that are, and the different colors represent the different parties who are assessed the AET surcharge. So if you look at this in concert with the last graph, it's understandable why there is an increase in 24 as compared to 23. It's because there's more parties who are opting in. The other thing this graph does on the y-axis is it shows the volume of megawatts rather than dollars for the surcharge. So we're talking on a monthly basis between 1 and 500 megawatts of emergency assistance that is being able to be offered through the WEIM with the use of this product. So this is actually, again, kind of consistent with how we originally envisioned this product being used. One of the concerns was if you remove the locking of transfers, would you have different strategies and more capacity leaning? My interpretation, and I'd be welcome for your comments, is that if we're talking about a couple hundred megawatts across the course of a month for the entire market footprint, that's probably not indicative of any structural market issues. Rather, this is how we intended an emergency reliability product that is used as such. I'd like to see if there's any questions on the data over the last 3 slides about how this product is being used.
I'm not currently seeing any questions coming in.
Okay, well, we can always come back to this if questions arise. Can we go to the next slide then? So now we want to dig into what is the inefficiency with the current design, and hopefully those last 3 slides kind of contextualize what that inefficiency actually means, and we can talk about it. But this simple example kind of helps illustrate the downside of an ex post surcharge. So you have 2 balancing authority areas, BAAs 1 and 2. BAA 1 fails the WEIM RSC, say the capacity test, by 100 megawatts. And so its AET surcharge exposure is bound by 100 megawatts. It then takes actions, whatever those actions may be, and it reduces its demand down to 950 megawatts. However, by not pricing the surcharge directly in the market, what ends up occurring is 75 megawatts of transfers occur from BAA2 to BAA1. And that's simply because the market optimization sees the resource at $150 in BAA2 as cheaper than the resource in BAA1 that is priced at $200. So it will utilize all of the supply in BAA2 the end result is that there's a surcharge on 75 megawatts, 25 or 50 megawatts were actually needed to cure a reliability issue. 25 megawatts are the result of an efficient market dispatch that unfortunately does not include the surcharge within the dispatch itself. So I alluded to this example earlier. It was lifted from the paper that we put out in 2022, but I want to stop again and see if there's any questions about how the potential of economic displacement would materialize when a BA is opted into AET. Again, this is something we can come back to, but for now we can just move on to the next slide. This is the percentage of economic displacement on the AET transfers over the last roughly 2 years. You can see that, again, it's a pretty big spread. There are some instances where the transfers are mostly for reliability purposes. There's other instances where a BA has significant exposure to this economic displacement. To help contextualize this graph, though, please consider the 3 other data slides that we presented, kind of showing the total volumes of AET transfers that occurred and the dollars involved. These are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars across a month for the entire market footprint. And so we recognize that this is not an ideal outcome. In a perfect world where we all had infinite time and the ISO and stakeholders had infinite bandwidth, we would design something different. But from our perspective right now, not hearing and outcrying, kind of seeing this data, it seems like the inefficiency that we identified originally has presented as expected, but at reasonable low volumes such that it doesn't detract from the existing product's design, which is intended to increase reliability. Can we go to the next slide? Now, let's talk about what it would take to put it in market design, because like I've alluded to, there's a better way to do this, and there is. And this is absolutely something that we can do to the extent it's a priority for the stakeholder community. Right now, the market algorithm has the ability to implement a hurdle rate. We do this, I think it's 1/100th of a cent on transfers between BAs as a mechanism to drive the solution to a more stable and quicker, or drive the solution more quickly to a stable solution. This same functionality could be leveraged to put a hurdle rate into a deficient BAA who has failed to market. This would adhere to the principle that you could ensure that that BAA has utilized all of its supply that it's offered into the market prior to clearing any transfers into that BA. However, unfortunately, it's not as simple as just putting a hurdle rate, because it raises the next question of what should that hurdle rate be? If that hurdle rate is $1,000, then you could have transfers priced at more than $1,000. To the extent that you want to ensure that those transfers are some other value, which I think Bruce alluded to, that's not $1,000, you could do that, but then you'd have to look at what is the price in the deficient BA, what is the price in the broader market footprint, dynamically calculate what that hurdle rate would be, and then feed that back into the dispatch algorithm. This is doable. This is not simple. This is a substantial technology change that we would have to implement, and prior to the end of this year, that's not something that we think is feasible. There are other complex policy items that this would impact and that we would have to work through with stakeholders. If we're going to be honest about this, this is kind of crude scarcity pricing, so we'd all have to be okay with what that means. The available balancing capacity product, which is withheld capacity that's only released into the market when a balancing authority area hits certain penalty prices in its scheduling run, that doesn't really work with this design. Or if it does work, it involves probably doubling the price caps, and that's another complicated policy discussion. The other thing I would highlight is we are talking in a parallel effort, the price formation enhancements, about a new way to test for BAA level market power within the EDAM and EIM footprints, and this would be the BAA level grouping approach. this hurdle rate would create groups, and we would just have to make sure that however we're dynamically determining a hurdle rate makes sense within the context of testing for BA level NPM. All of these problems are solvable. The ISO has the ability to solve these. I think stakeholders have the ability to help us get to the right solutions. But in the near term, again, it's a question of, is this a priority for the community, or do we collectively think that the existing design, while not perfect, provides a good reliability backstop at the cost of some level of inefficiency? Can we go to the next slide? So the ISO's proposal would be to extend the existing AET product by just removing the sunset date. We believe that this is consistent with what we've heard as priorities from stakeholders and from governance members. We think this retains the existing level of reliability that we have, and it doesn't preclude us from, at a future date, having a more nuanced in-market design. It just doesn't reduce reliability in the interim while we're working on that design, according to whatever prioritization stakeholders put forward on fixing this issue. And I think I have one more slide before questions. So, bonus slide. In addition to removing the sunset provision, we do want to change one other aspect of AET, which we believe is consistent with the original policy. It's come to our attention through recent observations that balancing authorities acting in coordination with reliability coordinators to resolve reliability issues could be driven into an RSC failure, which has an AET surcharge implication. This is not an outcome that we like, at least. We would want this to, we don't want a balancing authority area to have to, in their decision to use this as a reliability backstop, try to balance the risk of working, the risk or the timing of working with reliability coordinators against the potential financial exposure from the AET surcharge. So we're simply proposing to provide an exemption that ensures that coordinated actions with a reliability coordinator don't result in the AET surcharge being applied. Before I turn it over to Heather, I wanted to stop and see if there's any questions on any of the material that I've put out.
We just have one hand raised by Saurabh.
Hi there. Hi, Danny. Good morning. Saurabh Monga, Manager, Power Operations Engineering at SMUD. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, Saurabh.
Thank you. Hey, can you please elaborate a little bit more on what do you mean by the coordinated actions with RC to reduce the financial exposure? Are you saying that there would be a way to track like if we fail the test because of the actions and then we are able to revert back those surcharge payment charges or whatnot?
Yeah, I think the implementation will have to run through a BRS and probably put into the BPMs. But the dynamic that we saw is a balancing authority area that was taking unscheduled flow mitigation actions in coordination with the reliability coordinator was driven into AET surcharges. And we think that going forward, that's not a situation that we want to continue. We'd like BAs to be able to take coordinated actions with RCs and still have this as a reliability product if necessary.
Okay, and that would be in place, this summer or whatnot, because we are, bank is strongly considering using this function. We would like to sign up for this, but this, comment has made, given me a little bit of unsettling feeling in terms of that we're trying to take coordinated actions to mitigate some of the concerns, and that may end up in a position where we fail the test. I would like a little bit more clarity on this.
So that the tariff provision could be implemented either manually or through a settlements process as soon as it's approved by the CAISO governance structure and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So that would be the soonest it could be implemented. I'm guessing probably sometime late this summer, but please don't quote me on that because while we think this is a reasonable proposal, we still have to go through our governance process and the FERC. As to when this would be implemented in an automated way, that's a question I don't have the ability to answer right now, given all of the other technology lifts the ISO is trying to perform. But from what you would see and what your exposure is on your settlement statement, as soon as this is tariff approved, we would be able to reflect that in what the settlement is.
Right. And so just to put a little more color around that, for those who don't know, for tariff revisions, we have to first take those to our board. I don't think the May board meeting is realistic, where we are now. So it'll be the board meeting, after that, unless Danny tells me different and we can get it to the May meeting.
That's right. No, this wouldn't be an item for May.
Right. And so I just don't think there's any way. We'll file it at FERC, shortly after we can ask for an early effective date if that's what stakeholders want. So it's really that board meeting. And I think for stakeholders who would be interested, supportive comments here, supportive comments elsewhere, can help drive that quickly if that's what folks are interested in. But Danny, I think maybe just to give, I guess I'll turn it back to you. We had a while before we even understood that it's a potential that this RC coordination action could happen. I think it was a rare and outside occurrence, but did you want to offer anything more on that to kind of stakeholders who are evaluating the product?
That's exactly right. This happened fairly recently in the 2.5-year life cycle of this product.
Okay, so it is a rare occurrence, and there's anything you guys can do to quantify this, or I know we can't predict the scenarios, but seems like what I'm hearing is this is a rare occurrence. It's not that it is, it's not undermining the underlying advantage of signing up for this product, because as you know, we are evaluating this. We've been a little bit slow to this because we have to get everybody on board, and we, are leaning towards signing up for this, but this thing is a little bit, unsettling. And I just wanted to get some sort of clarity from you guys, or quantification of how often this happens, or can this undermine the underlying advantage of the product itself? But it seems like the answer I'm hearing is no, this is a rare occurrence.
I can confirm this is a rare occurrence. Whether it undermines the reliability benefit provided by the product is really the determination and at the discretion of each BA.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm not seeing any other questions at this time.
Okay, well then I think we can turn it over to Heather for a slide or two.
Well, I don't have the slides in front of me. So Danny, we're going to the next one. You want to control my go?
Yeah, we're going to go to the next slide.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone again. So if we move forward as we've outlined here, and of course this is open to discussion, though I didn't hear a lot of questions with opposition. So I'm taking that we're all rowing in the same direction, but if we're not, we'll reevaluate. So two things we would need to do to make this happen. First, we did put that sunset period pretty explicitly in our tariff with a date. And so we would propose to remove that here. So that's shown in a deletion. I've put the tariff citation for you. You can read through the strike through. It's a pretty straightforward provision. The second change goes to what we were just having an interaction and discussion about, to allow for crediting when actions are taken in coordination with the reliability coordinator. And so what this does, what we're proposing, is to put the language to essentially exempt someone from the charge. Our crediting mechanism is generally captured, as Danny went through, in in the dynamic transfer calculation. So just to go through the order of operations, you have one, opted in through the master file, and you're registered to take AET on the day in question. So that's happened. Two, on the day in question, your balancing authority fails the RSE. So three, you would then be subject to the lower of the quantity specified. And so the crediting mechanism would be taken into account here. We would propose to implement, as Danny said, through some further discussions in a BRS about, what's the automation versus manual action. And we can detail some more in the BPM as well. But for tariff language, we wanted to hit this at a high level. We did see this come up in, I know, at least one instance very recently as we were discussing about a very specific action on a very specific, hopefully unlikely to be replicated scenario. We want to capture, though, the broader concept, not that very specific scenario. So we proposed some general language. We're happy to take feedback on that, of course. But that's how we would get to the crediting. So happy to discuss if anyone would like. Otherwise, folks can review this or with their counsel, the proposed tariff language that we would offer. And Danny, I assume we're going to have a comment template, and one of our comment templates will provide an opening for this, or of course you can always attach your own document if you wanted to excerpt out and offer specific red lines. But other than that, I don't think I have much more to say on this one.
Thanks, Heather.
Do I have another slide?
No,
Okay.
This is hopefully short and sweet, but obviously that's what we want comments to see if our understanding is shared by stakeholders. So to that effect, you'll see a comment template in the next couple days. We would be asking for comments due 2 weeks from now. So then, and from there, we'll kind of reassess how we move forward with this and what AET looks like going into 2026. Before we sign off, though, I'd like to reopen the question phone line and see if anybody else has any questions or comments or anything the ISO can assist with answering as you think this through.
Not seeing any questions coming in at this. Oh, we just got a hand raised from Todd.
Danny, I just want to thank you for such a clear presentation and bringing the data. Love it. Really appreciate it. We'll consider it and provide our feedback and comments.
Thanks, Todd. I look forward to reading your comments.
And I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, well, I think that's it for Heather and I. Christina, we turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Danny. Thank you, Heather. Now, if we go on to the next slide, I just have a quick announcement slide before we wrap up. For insights into the ISO grid and market operations, be on the lookout for our Energy Matters blog, where you can always subscribe. And before I close out, I just want to note that if any other questions come up, you can always reach out to us at ISO Stakeholder Affairs at kaiso.com, and we can always route your questions to the appropriate folks. And with that, we'd like to thank you so much for joining today's call. As a reminder, this meeting was recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. The video file will be posted on the initiative webpage. We thank you so much, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you to everybody for taking the time today.